Here at Northwest Gospel Church, we made a pretty big announcement a couple weeks ago. Today we're talking about it. Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we explore what it looks like to truly be the church in today's culture. You're back. It's been a few minutes.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back.
Thanks, man.
Andrew's here, Ben's here, Cody's here. So...
What's your hat mean? It's a feather.
I don't know. Oh, I don't know. It's a brand called Pharaoh. It's like a... I think it might be a golf brand officially. I don't know.
Cool.
It's an Amazon. No, not Amazon. It's like an Instagram ad.
I'm glad about that. This is great.
Yeah. That's definitely what we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
So you haven't been around to the podcast. You've been a little busy.
Yeah, dude. There's been...
Supposedly.
Yeah. I just claim to be busy and then I blow everything off. Yeah, dude, there's been a lot going on the last, I don't know, what's the date? August 1st? Yeah, dude, the last like 15 months. It's been pretty busy.
So we had a member night, Campus Washougal, East Vancouver, here, a couple weeks ago, and we brought our church family into some stuff that's been going on behind the scenes for quite a while that finally ready to share. And let's talk about it. So somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I missed the member night. What's the elevator pitch? What happened?"
We announced the family of churches that has developed through a partnership between Northwest Gospel Church, which is two local churches, Camas Washougal and East Vancouver, and then the three churches of Some of You Church, which are, they call them Heritage Park, West Side, and Battleground. And so their three churches and our two churches are just basically two different multi-churches. Well, we were, and then we are now coming together to be one multi-church, one family of churches. And that has been a thing that's been in the works now technically since like late last fall. Officially last November 2023, their elders and our elders both voted unanimously to like explore what this could look like. And then we, and so that hired a consultant, an outside consultant, Brad House, who wrote the book Multi-Church that both of us read. And then we, just a ton of stuff occurred there. And we went through it all, and we were ready July of 2024 to announce that that's happening, right? So we're coming together.
Cool. So there's all sorts of logistical questions that people could follow up with. But let's start with more the why. So somebody's like, oh, that's cool, but why would you guys do that in GC? And why would some of you do that? Like, what's like, I don't know, like, did somebody need to do this? Somebody have to do this? Like, why? What's the point?
Typically in church, like mergers or partnerships, or like when churches come, three churches come together to do a new thing together, that typically it's a thing that happens when you have to do it, right? And Ben, your church, Camas Washougal, so 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now, that Daryl, who was the lead pastor there, reaches out to me, November of 2017, in fact, and we have lunch at an Olive Garden. I think I had ravioli that day. And so we sat down and...
over under 4 breadsticks that he ate.
You're pretty generous for only making it 4.
So,
giving him some level of dignity.
And in that, and Daryl, he'd been there 21 years. Their church had been in decline for a little while, and they, it was at a point where like he was ready to kind of move out of that lead pastor type role, and they weren't at a place where they could afford a new lead pastor, and just really, he had heard about us from a mutual acquaintance that knew we were pretty close together theologically, which was interesting because we weren't in the same church network or denomination at the time at all. And so he just heard that, and we met together, and that manifested in like within 4 months, those two churches were merged. That was what's called like an adoption merger, right? And so like at the time we were called Life Point, they were called Parkside, and that's when we changed our name collectively to Northwest Gospel Church. And that's a pretty simple merger. That's what mostly happens, is when like one church is at a point where it's like either dying or could dissolve, and then it partners together with another church, and they adopt it, and then you replant it. And so we did that. It took like over a year, not only to do that merger, but then also to kind of replant it. And
it's often called revitalization.
Yep. And so that revitalization process, and then we hired you, Ben, late 2018, so like almost over a year after Daryl and I had sat down. That was a really quick hiring process, but we did it. And then February of 2019, relaunched that as Northwest Gospel Church, Camas Washougal. And that's years ago now.
So somebody might say, well, I'd show up at an NGC or a Summit View on a Sunday morning. That doesn't seem to be the case.
This is like very, very different. Yeah. So that's the normal merger. And in fact, on the Summit View side, back in 2012, Summit View Church was just a single church, what's now called their Heritage Park campus. And that church actually did an adoption merger with a church out in Philida. And I don't even know what the name of that church was at the time. Philida something. So anyway, they adopted Philida and made it another campus, right? So that was back in 2012. That was, years before we even did Camas Washougal. So they became two churches, and that was like another campus, right? And so that became what's now called their West Side campus. And then the way they became three churches was in 2020, they planted Battleground. So adoption mergers are what's normal, or you plant a church out of your church and it stays a part of you. Those tend to be the typical ways churches become multi-church. And it's a whole different episode, but multi-church versus multi-site is very, very different, right? So we are both multi-churches, right? And so now they went through a leadership transition last year, and in that, they kind of pulled us in, and me particularly, into their elder room to just on an occasional basis to kind of work with them, counsel, like walk them through some stuff where there's a lot of mutual connections between our elders. A lot of guys on our elder team know their guys on their elder team, and there's a lot of overlap there. And so both of these churches were established churches that joined the Acts 29 network in the last like 3 or 4 years, right? We joined it about 3 or 4 years ago. They joined it about 2 years ago. And so we were the only two Acts 29 churches in the Portland metro area, and that's just a church planting network that we're both a part of. So there was mutual relationship there. And so when the transition happened in leadership with them, with their lead pastor, we started collaborating together a little bit more. After 4 to 6 months of collaboration, these talks began to happen. And so, Tyler, it's a different type of merger. This is what's often called a marriage merger, where two existing churches that don't have to do this decide, could we be better together, right? And so, merger is a legal word. We've been calling it partnership because people think of, when they think of merger, they think of an entity dying or dissolving and no longer existing, and then, something else taking it over. But this is not that, in the sense of like, this is the legal side is not really what I'm speaking about relevantly here. On a practical level, nothing's dying here, right? These existing churches on the Summit View side are all super stable, viable, good position financially, and the same thing is true on the NGC side. So this is literally just two multi churches that look at it. Our leadership spends months and months together praying, fasting, dialoguing. We agree doctrinally, which is the biggest thing, right? Like, and that when we all got together as elders and like started to look through this in more detail and saw that like doctrinally there's no disagreements on paper. Like we have all the same confessional statements. Then we both agree with multi-church. And so the question of why, we began to ask the question through relationship, through prayer, through counsel, why not? Like, why not do this? And so the one line I have on it is like, at the end of the day, if you go like, why would the Lord lead two churches to do this? And I thought of this months ago and prayed through it with the other elders involved a lot. This is a unity play, right? We're making a play for unity in our local churches, in our local county. And a lot of us who are involved with this as elders have been in this community for decades or a decade and a half or more. And we're saying this is a moment in the kingdom where we can come together and be better together. And so why not do that? And the unity of the church shows the beauty of the gospel. That's been kind of my tagline on this, is that the church's unity shows the gospel's beauty. This doesn't mean that every church should do this, right? Like churches that don't agree doctrinally could not ever do this, right? But if you agree doctrinally with another church and you are looking for ways to collaborate beyond just like, hey, let's be friends, let's collaborate, but like, let's see if we can do this together better than we could apart. And that's been both sides mutually have seen that confirmed again and again and again. And so, yeah, we're doing it.
So something you said a couple times is this idea, somewhat of the answer to the why, is that we can be better together.
Yeah.
Somebody who misses the member night says, or somebody who's at the member night says, that sounds awesome. How are we going to be better together?
Yeah.
Not negatively, like how are we? I'm trying to say that negatively, I couldn't do it. But like, you know, like what, like
why are you so negative?
Yeah,
Tyler?
practically, like how are we better together than we are apart?
Yeah, dude. What you talk about that, Ben? In the sense of like your entire experience here is together, right? Tyler and I have had years of this just being East Vancouver by itself, and so I think Tyler and I could both speak to better together with Camus, but like your whole experience here has been in a multi-church framework, and you also have a decade of experience in a church without a multi-church framework, right? So down in Dallas. So like, what have you seen and experienced in the better together aspect of this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of practical, logistical things that make it better. But I think for me, relationally, to be a part of something that, you know, is more than just the one location where you're pastoring, but you are on mission in an area, in a county, with another church, now with other churches who, like you already said, are like-minded doctrinally, have the same mission and vision that they're trying to accomplish, and really getting to, it goes beyond even just a church network, but like it's a real partnership, a real relational connection where we're, you got to, I mean, for me as a lead pastor, having another lead pastor like you, and now I'm going to have some others too that are kind of in the trenches, know what it's like to serve in that capacity, and being able just to encourage each other, sharpen each other, learn from each other. It's almost like the benefits of a church network, but like even more access, more proximity, and those sorts of things. And so, yeah, I think for me being, you know, this was my first time being in a lead pastor role, to not be on my own, right? Like a lot of people, when they plant churches or they take on a church role, especially a first time as a lead, they kind of are on their own, right? And they're having to build something up from scratch without any support or help. And so to have the support of East Vancouver and those connections has been huge for me. And I think, you know, we're going to be able to offer that to specifically, you know, to John and Kenan at Summit View and their churches. And so it's kind of, I mean, you've said this as we've announced it and talked about it, like it kind of comes to the point where we have to ask, why not do this, right?
Yeah.
If we are like-minded and we're in the same area and we want to accomplish the same things, why would we not team up and do this together and support each other and pool our resources together? It is a rare thing, and that's actually kind of sad. I think you said this at the member meeting, but what often is in the headlines is how churches are splitting, or churches, you know, there's all this division or moral failures in leadership. Rarely do you see this sort of thing, that two healthy churches are going to get together for the sake of the mission. And I would just say to anyone who's maybe a little skeptical or who thinks, you know, this is just, you know, a certain person or even NGC just trying to, you know, gain more status or power or resources, or I can just tell you that's not the case. And really this is because of the mission. Before this even came up, since I've been here, and I know well before I got here with you guys, the goal is to reach Clark County and the Portland metro area with the gospel and to plant gospel-centered churches who are preaching the Bible expositionally, equipping the church to be the church. And so that's been the mission always. And did we know how God was going to answer those prayers and bring it about? No. But apparently in his sovereignty, he's doing it this way, where he's bringing us into this family of churches. And so, you know, I think we kind of envisioned it more of like planting churches out, you know, and Lord willing, that will still continue to happen. But this is just the way God is answering those prayers and the way that we're able to, I mean, if you look at the map, I mean, really spread out across the county. There's going to be 5 churches on mission together to preach the gospel and to make disciples. And we're trying to, participate in the kingdom here, not just build an empire. So, and that's just the truth. That's authentic. Because I know some people could say like, oh yeah, like,
Yeah.
they're only doing this so that they can get bigger or whatever, someone that's cynical or skeptical would say. But as someone who's been really involved in this, but also kind of, on the outside a little bit, watching the other elders take this on, I can assure you that the motives are pure and that it's for the sake of the Great Commission in our county. So
I feel like people like, and you're going to deal with a lot of spiritual warfare. You're going to deal with a lot of, and I don't even put this into the category of there's been a lot of spiritual warfare through the last, for me, many, many months, and for a number of the elders working on this, that's just been bananas. But even beyond that, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of, at times there will be people not understanding or be like, hey, why do, because this is not normal operating procedure for the church, right? And one of the arguments that I was making on that at the initial thing I think you mentioned was like, is that more God or is that more us, right? Is that like, if you agree doctrinally, like, is that, and again, if you're a single church that doesn't multi-church, this can be weird, right? Jumping into a multi-church can be very, very weird. If you're 2 multi-churches that already multi-church, is this so weird? Like, why is this weird? Like, yes, it's a jump for, on the NGC side, to go from 2 local churches to 5. On the SVC side, to go from 3 to 5. That's a jump, right? And that's a quicker jump than you would really ever have. Nobody's going to plant like 3 churches at once that are a part of the thing, right? And yet it's something that you look at, and as we've gone very slow and methodical and due diligence and vetting it all and relationally working through it all for so many months as elders, we've just seen the Lord again and again, like, create this incredible unity and unity of purpose, unity in relationship. And it's been a beautiful thing. And I think I've seen the lion's share, the vast, vast, vast majority of people at all 5 churches, but at both multi-churches who have found out of this have been super affirming and like, oh my goodness, imagine this. But I've also been, we've heard as well. And at times people have had real, solid questions on it. But I've been surprised too at times that we tend to think in such kind of cultural terms and also in sort of worldly terms on things of like winners and losers or control. Like, well, like what's so is this one church taking over another? Is this one church killing another for its own ends? And all these sorts of things. And people can ask those questions authentically. People can ask them out of fear or maybe, church things they've experienced before where there are controlling leaders, or when something gets bigger, it can get less healthy and all that kind of stuff. And I think, like you're saying, Ben, that's not here. And one of the ways that you're like, I guess I'm almost not even saying, if you're in Clark County, or if you're in one of these churches and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know about this, like, just stick around and find out. Like, and what I'm saying is, like, I'm not guaranteeing like everything's going to be perfect for the rest of our lives, but I'm saying like our commitment as pastors, and I think I'd say this for all 3 of us here, is like, there are going to be people who misunderstand. There are going to be people who assume impure motives, or people who, out of their own pain or fear or whatever, respond in a way that is, reactive. But we'll be here, and we'll keep doing the work week by week, preaching the word, equipping people, and through faithfulness and the plurality of elders and equipping the church to be the church, we're going to continue being on mission. And we'd love anybody to be a part of it, and particularly those who are currently a part of it to remain a part of it. But it's something that and Tyler and I, we dealt with that when we first got here to Life Point years and years ago, where there was suspicion, or there was like, oh, are you going to stick around, or are you going to? And we were just like, you just have to continue to lean in and be faithful and plod on and let the Lord work it out in the end, knowing that as you preach the word and equip God's people, the Spirit's going to empower. He's going to do his work, but it's slow mustard seed, long-term work. And I think there's mutuality in that entire full council of elders between these 5 churches on that type of a framework,
Yeah, and I think I can understand some skepticism when you think about, especially a church growing in its locations and its size, because especially being in the Northwest, we have examples like Mars Hill and stuff that exploded into multiple campuses, and obviously that did not end well. And like you said, sometimes as something grows, there's a potential for it to become unhealthy. For anyone who's feeling that way, I would encourage them to do a little research, maybe even read the book Multi-Church, because multi-church and the way we're doing this is a lot different than multi-site. And like places like Mars Hill did it. This is not driven by one personality. This is equipping guys like myself to be local lead pastors, to be primary preachers in their churches, to build elders, and do all those things. And it really is just kind of this decentralized interdependence that is really, I think, healthy and good. And so this isn't growing necessarily. I mean, Andrew, this isn't growing your platform or Northwest Gospel Church East Vancouver. This is just growing NGC in all these locations, and it's again for the sake of the mission. And so if you're wondering, do a little research on the differences between multi-church and multi-site, because obviously we're doing multi-church, and I think it's a lot more biblical and healthy way to do it, and I think kind of is preventative with some of those issues we've seen with other churches that are really just exploded.
Yeah, I think too. And I mean, we could have a ton of episodes on this, and practically, how's this going to look, and what's this going to look like?
Yeah.
I think one thing that stuck out to me is somebody said something a few months ago, and it stuck out to me. Not enough to where I remember the exact words that they said, because I might butcher what they said. But it was something along the lines of like, unity is better than proximity.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that hit me in the moment, but later on I thought about it way more, because months ago, back when we were just in relationship with this local church and kind of getting to know them and helping them through a leadership transition season, I was meeting with one of their local pastors, and he was like, hey, like I think we're going to have this vacancy on our staff, and like, let me know if you know anybody. And maybe this is because I'm a bad person, but like in the moment I was like, okay, I'll think about it. And then I thought about it, but it was like, there was no ownership of that. You know what I mean? Where it was like, I thought about it. Who could I send their way? Whatever. Just yesterday, sitting down with some of their staff members, they're like, we're going to have this vacancy. No longer is it like, all right, I'll think about it. It's like, okay, here's our problem. We got to fix it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, no longer is it the 3 or 4 of them departmentally at one church working toward that. It's a whole crew of us who are like dedicated to like kids ministry at whatever church going well, or music ministry at whatever church going well. You know, it's like, you know, there's ownership that happens now because of this family of churches that's so much better than even being like network partners where, you know, they're another Acts 29 church. The amount of emails I get from Acts 29 churches that are like, hey, you have any interns who might be interested in a job like this? Is, and again, like, want to help and have a big K kingdom minded like outlook on things, but when there is a level of ownership, it just changes things.
Yes.
And like to think about the idea of shepherding, it's like at the local church level, the elders at that local church are shepherding their people, but all of us as elders of all 5 now have a responsibility to make sure that ministry is happening and effective and biblical at all 5 of these churches. And so there's that level of ownership and it's gonna raise the bar, like not of quality, but of care, right? It's gonna raise the bar for like the type of ministry that we're able to do all around.
Yeah. And you say of not of quality, but I do think the collaboration that occurs when there is collaboration combined with ownership, right? That's not just kind of collaboration with no strings attached, that like, you know, we're being there for each other and we pastor in churches in the same area, and that's awesome. And we all of us have a lot of relationships with other guys in other churches that we collaborate with and that we pray with and everything else. And we're going to continue to work for unity in the wider church, even those that we're not, you know, that we agree on some primary issues, but maybe not secondary issues on, like those type of relationships will continue to be fostered and grow. But that, Tyler, that like the coming together in this partnership and the unity and collaboration, it will produce resource, you think about like on a staff, you bring someone onto a staff, right? And they have a specific job description. And we always talk about like that, there's seats on the bus, but like people change seats all the time, right? And what you're doing is as a staff member grows, and, we could tell the Max story on this podcast, but I think most people listening to this know the infamous Max. But like as people come onto the team and they grow in their understanding of God's gifting in their life and of what he might be calling them to do, and they kind of test those different things and grow in it. If you're one church and there's only certain specific things that can be done, if that person has a role as the music guy at that church, for him to suddenly start to develop and say, I want to get my MDiv and start to preach. I want to plant a church someday, those type of deals. If you're one church, you can work at that and you can work to equip him and continue to do that. If you're 5 churches and there are roles at the different churches, and this is Max's story, that Camus is growing and Ben's there and they have a good relationship that develops. And then, the seat for Max changed, not just in terms of what he was doing at his local church, but he actually changed to another local congregation and then entered into this associate role where he's still doing some stuff he did here, but then he's doing a lot more in a different church context and a different size dynamic and getting the opportunity to serve the church in that way. And that capability is going to occur now combined between the churches. What is it right now? I think we have 51 staff members.
54, I think.
54 staff members between the 5 churches and a number of open positions, and then creating a church support team from among the 5 churches that is supporting the wider family of churches. And so people not only being able to work in their local church, but also being able to resource other local churches from their spot in their local church. And not even to say what you can do with combined youth ministry or women's ministry or equipping resources. I mean, there's the sky's the limit on it. So I said something earlier in the podcast I want to clarify, though. Like, in terms of the entity, we are coming together as one legal entity. Like that is happening. And so the family of churches is going to be that umbrella entity that legally will be one entity, but it will be manifested in these 5 local churches, truly a family of churches. And so there's a dynamic, and we could, answer any questions on this podcast in the future on this, between the autonomy of those local churches and the interdependence of the local churches within the family of churches. And so, and those are all things that like we've worked through and agreed upon. And so we're in the days where this is now public, and the wider congregations are walking through it with us. And it's a pretty exciting time. But September 8th, we will launch out in this series together for the fall. We're doing it together in the Psalm series this summer, but we even started that before we went super public on this because we're still working out all the details of among our elders of this partnership. But the real kind of hard launch of this thing is September 8th, and we'll go through Colossians together this fall. And so, the 5 churches.
Yeah, and the day before that, we'll actually get together, all 5 churches, for a special night we're calling Together, an all-church musical worship night, and getting together, kind of having a party to celebrate the launch of this, which, if you're part of either Summit View or Northwest Gospel Church, you'll be hearing about in the coming weeks. So pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah.
This may have brought up some questions about this. If so, let us know. Podcast@tobethechurch.com. Have a great week.